It's been 7 years since investigators reopened the Natalie Wood murder investigation. Today, holding a news conference for the first time since, they questioned then-husband Robert Wagner's account.
Natalie Wood's mysterious death has haunted Hollywood for several years.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight, our metropolitan area and the whole world mourns the death of 43-year-old movie actress Natalie Wood.
The only people on the yacht that tragic night, including her husband, Robert Wagner, actor Christopher Walken, and the yacht's captain, Davern, have all given conflicting accounts of the story. But one voice has remained silent until now. At 51, Natalie Wood's daughter, Natasha Gregson Wagner, is finally speaking out.
Well, having my own daughter shifted the focus for me so much away from being motherless and becoming a mother myself. It was just the most healing thing that's ever happened.
What does she have to say about the night her mother died? Was it indeed an accident, or was there more to the story? Join us as we uncover Natasha's shocking revelations. The tragic night on the yacht. On November 28, 1981, Natalie was on the yacht with her husband, their friend Christopher Walken, and the yacht's captain, Davern, recording Brainstorm when something tragic happened. From the moment the Splendor set sail, something felt off. Natalie and Christopher Walken were filming Brainstorm together, and they had grown close during production. Too close, according to Wagner. That night, after drinking at a local restaurant, the group returned to the yacht. Tension was already high. The alcohol was flowing, and so were emotions. According to the yacht's captain, Davern, Wagner and Walken were arguing. It started as a conversation about Natalie's career. Walken believed she should focus on acting, while Wagner felt she should prioritize their family. But the argument got heated, turning into something much more personal. Natalie, who hated conflict, tried to escape the situation. At some point, she left and went to her cabin. The world is still yet to agree on what happened next. Even after several years, according to Wagner, he and Walken eventually calmed down, and everyone went to bed. He assumed Natalie was in her cabin, but hours later, she was gone. At the same time, Davern stated that Wood and Wagner argued that evening, which Wagner denied at the time. He claimed that the fight between Wagner and Walken escalated.
Robert Wagner picked up a bottle of wine and smashed it,
with Wagner smashing a wine bottle and accusing Walken of wanting to sleep with Natalie. Walken reportedly left the scene, and Wagner turned his anger toward Natalie. Not long after, Davern says he heard an argument on the deck. Voices were raised. Maybe someone fell into the water, and then there was silence. Not quite long after the noise Davern heard, Natalie, who was assumed to be in her cabin, was not seen. A search was eventually launched. However, there are reports that it came a little too late because of Wagner. But when the authorities finally came to their rescue, Natalie was found at precisely 8 a.m. on the 29th, and everyone assumed that she had drowned. According to an autopsy, it was revealed that she had bruises on her body and arms and an abrasion on her left cheek, but it did not indicate how or when the injuries occurred. With the autopsy report, her fans have come to ask if she was drowned accidentally and why is there bruises and abrasions on her. Her fans asked that if there were bruises on her, that means she was struggling with someone who attacked her, and why she was wearing a heavy jacket when she actually had a fear of water. Over the years, Wagner's version of events has shifted. In his first statement, he said Natalie must have tried to take the dinghy and fallen in. Later, he admitted they had argued, but insisted he had nothing to do with her death. Davern, on the other hand, changed his story too, but in a way that pointed more suspicion at Wagner. He later claimed that Wagner was responsible for what happened, though he didn't go as far as saying he killed her intentionally. Walken, the other key witness, has remained mostly silent, only saying that Natalie's death was a tragedy, and he didn't know what happened. After the incident, the Los Angeles County coroner ruled the cause of her death to be accidental drowning and hypothermia. But in 2011, the case was reopened after Davern admitted he had misled the police during the initial investigation. He claimed that Natalie Wood and Robert Wagner had argued on the night in question. According to Davern, Wood was flirting with Walken, which allegedly incited jealousy and anger in Wagner. He further alleged that Wagner deliberately stopped him from turning on the searchlights and alerting authorities after Wood's disappearance, ultimately holding Wagner responsible for her death. Wood's sister, Lana Wood, told CBS News that over a decade later, Davern reached out to her to explain what had happened, though she noted that she wasn't close to him and was unsure of his motives. Amidst all the court verdicts, Natalie's fans still now do not accept the fact that she drowned. But recently, their first daughter revealed a new revelation about her mother's death. What she said will leave you speechless. Keep watching. Jaw-dropping revelation from Wagner's daughter. For several years, Natalie Wood's death remained one of Hollywood's most talked-about mysteries. Rumors and conspiracies spread like wildfire, and despite the passing years, they never truly faded. Theories, accusations, and unanswered questions surrounded the tragedy. But amid all the noise, one voice had stayed silent until now. That voice belonged to Natalie's daughter, Natasha Gregson Wagner. Natasha was only 11 when her mother died. Growing up, she lived in the shadow of Natalie's legacy and the scandal that followed her death. She avoided the media circus, refusing to be drawn into the endless theories. But as time passed, she realized that if she didn't speak, others would continue to control the story. So she decided to take back her mother's narrative. When Natasha finally broke her silence, she did not bring shocking revelations or dramatic accusations. Instead, she spoke with love and clarity. She wanted the world to remember Natalie Wood not as a tragic mystery, but as a devoted mother, a passionate actress, and a warm, kind woman. The media often reduced Natalie's legacy to her death, but Natasha wanted to change that. But perhaps the most important reason why she spoke is because of the ongoing suspicion surrounding her stepfather, Robert Wagner. For years, people rumored that he knew more than he admitted. Some even accused him of being involved in Natalie's death. But Natasha never believed it. To her, Wagner was a loving father figure who had always been there for her. She defended him against the accusations, saying he would never have hurt her mother. According to Natasha, her mother's death was a horrible accident, nothing more. What hurt her most was how people twisted the tragedy into something sinister. Just when everyone thought it was over, the controversy resurfaced in 2011 when investigators reopened the case. This reignited public interest, and the rumors intensified. That is not all. Authorities changed the official cause of death from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. But people were not really convinced, in fact. The revision fueled more questions and accusations, particularly against Wagner, but Natasha stood firm. She called the accusations cruel and baseless. She pointed out how easy it was for outsiders to assign blame when they weren't there. She spoke about the father she knew, the man who raised her with love and care. And she insisted that her mother wouldn't have wanted Wagner to suffer. For Natasha, this was more than just setting the record straight. It was about protecting her mother's memory. She wanted people to focus on Natalie's life, not just her tragic end. Natalie Wood was an actress who won people's hearts with her performances in Rebel Without a Cause, West Side Story, and Splendor in the Grass. She was a mother who adored her children. She was a wife, a friend, and a sister. Her life was full of passion, talent, and love. Yet too often, all people remembered was how she died. Despite Natasha's efforts, the mystery of that night lingers. Some will always believe there is more to the story. But for Natasha, the truth is simple. Her mother's death was an accident, not a crime. And no amount of speculation will change that. She chose to speak out not to convince the skeptics, but to ensure her mother's legacy was more than just a Hollywood tragedy. Natalie Wood was more than a mystery. She was a legend, a mother, and a woman who deserved to be remembered for her life, not just her death. And Natasha Gregson Wagner is determined to make sure that happens. And talking about Natalie's life, the life of the woman at the center of it all, will leave you completely speechless. Keep watching to find out how she came to be the legend we remember today. Natalie Wood's rise to stardom. This story takes us back to 1938. Natalia Nikolaevna, the woman later known as Natalie Wood, was born to Maria Zakharenko and Nikolai Zakharenko. Her parents were Russian immigrants who fled to the United States during the political turmoil in Russia. It will interest you to know that Natalie didn't just become a Hollywood star. She has been raised to be one from the moment she could walk. According to an interview she had, her journey into Hollywood wasn't an accident. It was carefully planned, pushed by a mother who believed that fame was the only way to success. Her mother, Maria, wasn't just a supportive parent, she was relentless. She believed in superstition, omens, and the idea that her daughter was destined for greatness. Maria ensured Natalie was always picture-perfect, ready for the camera, and prepared for her big break. After so many lessons from her mother on how to charm her way into a role, at the age of 5, she got her first minor in the 1943 film Happy Land, where she played a little girl who drops her ice cream cone in a brief scene. Although her role here was minor, but least, it made her recognizable in the Hollywood industry. After this role, something shocking happened to Natalie in 1947. She shot to Hollywood fame when she was just 8 years, and that was in 1947. You see, she starred as Susan Walker, a skeptical young girl who doesn't believe in Santa Claus due to her mother's upbringing. Although she was only 8, the maturity she displayed in acting her role was beyond her age. Not quite long after the premiere of the film, it became a holiday classic, and Natalie became a name Hollywood couldn't ignore. After the movie, Natalie became the perfect child star who was disciplined, professional, and able to cry on cue. However, that last part did not come to her naturally. She admitted in an interview that Maria had drilled it into her. For instance, do you know that her mother would whisper terrifying things to her just before a scene? Well, it was meant to force her to cry real tears for the camera. If that didn't work, Maria had another trick. She would make Natalie stare at a light bulb until her eyes watered. To the audience, you would agree that she was a talented little girl who has been trained to deliver perfection at any cost. Remember that being a child star was a very demanding one. For Natalie, the school wasn't in a classroom. Her classroom was always on set. Also, playtime didn't exist. Every moment of her childhood was dedicated to making sure she stayed relevant. Remember that Hollywood had no problem replacing child actors when they grew up, and Natalie couldn't afford to slow down. She really made sure she made hay while the sun shone on her. It is impossible to underestimate her mother's effort in her rise to Hollywood stardom. One thing her mother made sure of was that she controlled her diet, friends, free time, and indeed everything that may hinder her Hollywood fame. Shockingly, by the time Natalie was a teenager, she had starred in over a dozen films. But the real challenge was just beginning. Keep watching. Remember, we said Hollywood had a pattern, and that's precisely where Natalie's real challenge lies. In Hollywood, child stars often struggled when they outgrew their cuteness. And one thing was that Natalie wasn't going to fade away. She proved she could handle more mature roles when she starred opposite James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause in 1955. In the film, she played Judy, a teenager dealing with love, rebellion, and a complicated family life. It was a role filled with raw emotion and full of depth, unlike the previous roles she had acted in. Now, she wasn't just a sweet little girl anymore. She was a serious actress. And at just 16, she earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. If you think Natalie will succumb to the Hollywood tradition of a child star, then you are wrong. Natalie's career did not die after her childhood. Instead, the 1950s and early 1960s marked golden years of achievement for her in the industry. During that period, she became one of Hollywood's most sought-after young actresses, landing significant roles in films like Splendor in the Grass, 1961, and West Side Story, 1961. The West Side movie, in particular, solidifies her place in Hollywood history. In the film, she played Maria, the lead role in the Broadway musical adaptation. Though her singing was dubbed over, her performance was unforgettable. The film became an instant classic, and Natalie became one of the decade's biggest stars. Despite Natalie's success, she struggled with the weight of fame. Remember, we said Natalie had been in the industry her entire life, and every decision had been made for her. Now, the pressure to be perfect was exhausting. She had spent years trying to live up to the expectations her mother and Hollywood executives set. But deep down, she wanted more control over her own life. What happened next will shock you. Natalie started pushing back from acting major roles, refusing to be confined and separating her identity from her on-screen persona. Luckily, by the mid-1960s, she had already conquered Hollywood. But what happens when an actress wants more than just fame? What happens when she wants to define her path, away from the scripts and the studios and the constant pressure to be perfect? We will be discussing that next. Love, scandals, and Natalie's death. You must have been wondering whether Natalie had time for a relationship. Yes, she did, and her love life was also as famous as her acting career. From a young age, she was surrounded by Hollywood's biggest names, and her relationships were just as dramatic as the roles she played. She wasn't just a star on the screen. She was the leading lady in some of the most talked-about romances in Hollywood history. If there was one man who would always be tied to Natalie, it was Robert Wagner. Even before they crossed paths, Natalie had been obsessed with this young, rising actor. She was so obsessed that she had his pictures plastered on the wall of her room, and she would always tell his friends that she would eventually marry Robert Wagner. Fortunately, in 1956, her dream became real. The studios where she worked set her up on a date with her crush, and from the outside it looked like a perfect love story. At that time, Natalie was 18, while Robert was 26. They were young, beautiful, and Hollywood royalty. Their relationship soon became the talk of the industry, and people started calling them the perfect couple. A year later, in 1957, they married in a fairy tale wedding. They were a Hollywood golden couple. But behind closed doors, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Keep watching. We will unveil the problem in their marriage soon. Remember, they were both Hollywood stars when they got married, but careers were pulling them in different directions after their union. Natalie was landing major roles, and the pressure on her was growing. At the same time, Wagner was trying to maintain his career. They were rarely in the same place at the same time. Hollywood relationships were tough, and theirs was no different. 5 years after their union, rumors started flying around, and people started whispering about their affairs, jealousy, and fights behind the scenes. The couple eventually shocked the world by announcing their divorce. After their divorce, Natalie didn't slow down like people were expecting her to do. Instead, she lived freely without anyone controlling or monitoring her movement. After the divorce, she dated some of the most famous men of her time. There were flings, romances, and a few serious relationships. One of the most talked about was with Warren Beatty. They starred together in Splendor in the Grass, and their on-screen chemistry turned into a real-life love affair. Beatty was charming, talented, and as ambitious as she was. But their relationship was chaotic. They fought constantly, and while there was passion, there was drama. It didn't last, but it made headlines. That was not the end of her relationship with men. She also had a relationship with Frank Sinatra and politician Henry Kissinger. After this, history repeated itself and people started speculating why she never had a stable home. Some even suggested her young age was why she could not keep relationships. By the late 1960s, Natalie was ready for something more stable. In 1969, she married British producer Richard Gregson. This time, it seemed different. She stepped away from acting for a while and focused on starting a family. In 1970, they welcomed a daughter, Natasha. For a moment, it looked like she had found the happy ending she had been looking for. But just like before, trouble wasn't far behind. A year later, their marriage fell apart when Natalie discovered Gregson was having an affair. She didn't waste time. She filed for divorce and walked away. After her last breakup, she thought she was done with the relationship, but something mysterious happened. In 1972, shortly after her separation from Gregson, Natalie and Robert Wagner reconnected. They remarried that same year and were together till the day she passed on. Thank you for staying with us. Do you think they told us the truth about Natalie's death? Share your opinions with us in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, click the following video on your screen, and you will enjoy it.